What's up again, everybody? So I just woke up and was absolutely assaulted by this article, and so now I'm going to present it to you so that you can feel my feelings, because my feelings are strong. So I'm going to talk through this article, and I'm going to give you my perspective as a player personally, as someone who actively loves the Blitz format. I like Blitz more than Classic Constructed. I like Blitz more than Commoner ever. I will ever like Commoner. I like Blitz. Blitz and UPF, now that's a close one, but I do prefer Blitz over the other formats that I mentioned. And they've made some changes to the format for Skirmish Season 7. So I'm going to tell this to you from my perspective, but then also I will give it to you at the end from the perspective of the player base and what I think overall the game, what this means for the game and the format in general. And I do think there's lots of good stuff in this, but I do think there's a couple of things that I take issue with. So this, at the very beginning, just talks about that people love the Blitz format. It's like a hugely played format across the world. I don't know. Let me know in a comment below. Are you someone that loves the Blitz format? Tell me down there if your stores run a ton of Blitz events and people show up to them. And it's still the most accessible format when it comes to actually getting into the game after you've purchased like a pre-con Blitz deck, because it's easy to build a 40 card Blitz deck with no sideboard and equipment suite. It's very easy to do that. And then they talk about that they love Blitz as well, and so that they want the format to be loved by the group. And I will also jump right to the end. They want this format to be designed to spark excitement and joy, and all their good intentions behind a format don't matter if their number one priority, their players, are not having a blast. So with that in mind, they are making some changes as an experiment for Skirmish Season 7, which is coming up in like 2 weeks, from July 29th to August 13th. They have changed the way you build a deck in this format. Here's how you build a deck in Blitz for exactly Skirmish Season 7 and perhaps the future, but they haven't quite commented on that in the future. You will build a deck list with one hero, like your young hero, one card, and 52 other cards. So before, in the standard Blitz rules, you'd build a deck with 52 cards, and one of those cards was your hero. Now you're building 53 cards, one of those being your hero. So they've added a card to your overall pool, which is cool. Now, in the normal deck building world of Blitz, that would not matter really at all for anyone, because the only thing you could use those extra 11, 12 slots in this case as the inventory were equipment. That's all you could do, is just put equipment and weapons in there and then kind of have that be your sideboard for your matchups. And then everything relied on you being a good deck builder and looking at the meta and looking at how your hero wanted to function in the meta beforehand, and those 40 cards that you built into your deck were what carried you through that. Now that is changed. Now you have sideboard cards. You have a main board and a sideboard, or really you just have a pool of cards, a pile that you could choose to add cards in, take cards away from. And then at the start of the game, players reveal their heroes, decide who's going first, and then everyone presents 40 cards. Presenting 40 cards, I think this is really good, because it means that you're playing a format that is guaranteed to have a 40 card deck and not do the I'm gonna throw a pile together and play like a 51 card fatigue list, something like that, right? I think that's good. I agree with that. I think that would be really cool in general to approach. It's still a 40 card deck format, and it separates it in some way, shape, or form from Classic Constructed. But how many slots do you have? Well, let's take Kano for example. I play a ton of Kano. I was actually prepping a ton of Blitz Kano for this exact event a few months ago. And Kano is a hero that uses 4 basic equipment almost all the time, and then sometimes you swap out the faster chest piece for the slower one in Fandel Spring Tunic, and sometimes you swap out Alluvian Constellus and Waning Moon if you're into that sort of thing. So that's 7 equipment. So assuming that most heroes are similar to that, anywhere between 7 and 9 slots are equipment slots. So let's just call it 8 and be done with it. So if you have a 35 card core and you have 8 cards added to that, that gives you 43 cards of the 52 that you need to fill out your deck. So that gives you 9 cards that you could sub in. And just think about this. Blitz is a format that has 2 copies of every card can be played, right? So you can run 2 reds, 2 yellows, 2 blues of anything. Well, 9 cards, that's like 3 extra copies of cards that just don't have to live in your deck, plus 1 kind of ancillary card. That's a huge amount of change that you can make to your deck in general. That's actually very cool because you're taking out 9 cards and subbing in 9 cards. How transformational can you get with your deck at 9 cards out of 40? That's almost a quarter of your deck can change in a way, that's a really, really big deal and a really big change for this format, because now all of a sudden, in a format that a lot of people thought, you fold to certain matchups and you crush other matchups and there's no in between, now all of a sudden you don't have to fold to certain matchups and you don't have to crush other matchups. Now, it's good for some heroes and it's really not good for others, and in fact this is like really not good for a specific number of heroes. And then they talk about how their hope is that this new mode of deck construction will enable a greater degree of flexibility in strategy and gameplay, while still offering the pick up and play, fast-paced and frenetic style of Blitz that we all know and love. I will say this, I do not think that this slows down the process of playing Blitz just about at all. I think it will stay fast-paced and pick up and play, and that is one of my favorite parts about Blitz, and I'm glad that, in my opinion, it's not going to change with a simple sideboard process. I don't think that's going to make that much of a difference to the overall time that it takes. I will say this too. About a year ago in my Discord, we actually ran an event or two where we tried the Blitz format with a sideboard. I think we gave everybody like 6 cards, a 6-card sideboard, maybe an 8-card sideboard, something like that. So not terribly far off from this. And what we found was that it didn't actually make that much of a difference in certain matchups. Now, perhaps with the card pool having expanded as much as it has over the past year, now it will make a bigger difference. But I will say this, it did make one very specific difference at the time, and it would make a few more now. It basically made Kano, right? It basically made Kano, the wizard, a lot worse. And the reason it made Kano a lot worse is because it allows everyone to just go get 2 red Oasis Respites if they weren't in the deck already, and then all of a sudden just throw those in there and be good. Now, this was back like right after the wildfire days, so everybody just did that. Nowadays, you can include those Oasis Respites, and Kano doesn't take as much of a hit because he's not banking all on wildfire, but it does swing the game markedly for Kano, and I do think that this pulls Kano's power level down, and it's doing so not at the expense at all of any other hero's like viability, and I think that is awful. I think that's horrible. I hate that for this change, partially because I love Kano, but also because that could literally be done to any hero at any point. But they actually talk about this. Sick of losing to your store's Kano Master? Pick a few copies of Oasis Respite and soften the blow of those Aether Flares. Sure. Yeah, that's super difficult for you to really, practice your deck and you try to get good at a matchup that's, really technical. And it's cool. Just throw Oasis Respite in there. That's the benefit of sideboard. Prism's Aura is giving you Nightmares, Time Skippers, and Enlightened Strikes to the rescue. Now, this is an interesting one. Prism Aura is a deck that is coming on pretty strong, and it's a deck that could be conceivably good in this format, and it is gaining in popularity overall. So yeah, you have the ability to side in Time Skippers and Enlightened Strike. I mean, technically you could side in whatever you want to try and deal with the auras. The weird thing about it is that you probably already have, depending on what hero you're playing, you probably already have decent number of tools to actually attack into those and try and mitigate that, but now you have perhaps even more tools, so it pulls down the polarizing matchups. That's cool. And then of course this one is really interesting. Riptide laughing at you from behind a never-ending wall of traps, because Trap Riptide is a thing that for the most part you could play in Blitz. Introduce him to Burdens of the Past. I think this is the one that's just so okay, this sums up my issue with this personally. Tell me if I'm wrong in a comment below as ominous thunder rumbles in the background. Am I wrong about this? Here's the thing about Blitz, and I'm going to point this out too, because I have to start with this. You still have to choose your tools wisely, and we expect careful and thoughtful deck building to be rewarded in this updated version of Blitz. This right here, has always been the case in Blitz. You have always had to be a careful and thoughtful deck builder in Blitz because you're starting at 20 life and you don't have a sideboard. Therefore, you have to consider the meta before you sit down to the table. You have to consider the meta. You have to build your deck in a way that functions. Let's talk about Kano again. If you're looking at a meta that has a large portion of heroes playing like high AB, you have to make a choice. Do I play larger attacks, ones that go over the top of that AB? Do I try to play like go wide strategy that has like me using chain lightnings to kind of ping them and really pull cards out of their hand? You have to make that decision, and you have to make it from a thoughtful perspective, looking at the meta, going, how much am I going to see this? With a sideboard, I think this actually goes down. I think you lose some of that thoughtful deck building. I think you lose a little bit of that because now the matchups that you would worry about, well, you just throw in a couple of those cards and now you autopilot your deck, and if you draw those cards, then they win you the game in that matchup. And then that brings us to this, Riptide Traps. Blitz is the only format that has unique deck building ideas and decks like Riptide Traps. And it really, weirdly enough, it's the only ecosystem where things like that can exist. Why? Because you can't tech against it and immediately shut it down. And now, you can. So what do I think that this does for the format? Well, I think it makes it a little less careful and thoughtful. And I think it makes it a little less original. And therefore, I think it makes it feel a lot more like Classic Constructed Light. And I don't like that. I personally don't like that. But what I think overall this does for the format across the player base is a very positive. And I support some large portions of this for the game and the overall scene, and here's why. There's a lot of people that don't like this format simply because it doesn't feel very interactive. People maybe don't think of the format as very thoughtful themselves, and I disagree with that. I think this is a very you have to be very good at deck building and very good at fundamentals and knowing how your deck wants to play and when you can take damage. But they don't maybe think that way, and therefore they kind of deride the format. They push it off to the side. They say, I don't want to play that format. This will pull players in to play the format. At the very least, Blitz players want to try their Blitz decks with Sideboard, and Classic Constructed players will look at this and say, okay, it's a more legitimate format. I will go and play this format. So if you're looking at this and you're like, okay, how can we get more people to engage with the format that aren't engaging now? This is a fantastic way to do it. Changing like this, a beautiful way to update the format in a format that is very used to lots of shifts and pulls and turns and bans and things. This is the player base is probably fine with like adapting to this overall, and I'm excited to mess around with it. But it also encourages new players to jump in. And this is a huge one, and hear me out, because this is super smart from LSS if they were thinking this. And even if they weren't, this is perhaps a really good side benefit, ancillary benefit. Doing this will get more butts in seats for Skirmish Season 7. Therefore, it will get more support at your local game store, more money flowing into them, more support for them, and more local game stores going, oh, wait, lots of people wanted to show up for this and play. Let's run some more stuff like this. That is a huge deal. This is, in a way, this is a bid to support local game stores. Or it could be. It could function that way. If more players show up to play in Skirmish Season 7 because the format itself is functionally different and in a lot of people's eyes better, well, LGSs, they get more money. And they get more players. And they sell more concessions. And they get more packs. All of that functions to benefit the player base and the LGS. And I think that's really smart. I think it's really good. And my personal opinions of, I think the format maybe gets a little bit more constricted with creativity. And I think overall the format is misconstrued in the, zeitgeist of our game, is all ancillary to the fact that more people might play this and more LGSs get supported via that play. and that makes things very exciting. And so I have my own issues with it in some way, shape, or form, and you heard them, but I also think that this is a really exciting change. And it means that I get to take my normal Kano Blitz deck, and I get to take my Kano Surgent Aethertide deck and smash them together and try to figure it out. So I'm excited for that. Hey, if you enjoyed this video and you wanted to hear my candid response, please let me know in a comment below what you think. Is this format the best format that you play in? I want to know that. And also, make a number go slightly higher, because when that number hits 14K, I don't know, we'll pop some like little popper fireworks, we'll celebrate. Maybe we'll do a 14-hour stream. Maybe we'll open 14 cases of Dusk Till Dawn. I don't know. Let me know what we should do in a comment below. And as always, thanks for watching.